Loving, loving Sai Ram, Sister Karen Pasternak. The Sri Satya Sai Global Council West Indies lovingly welcomes you to the series Awake, Unite and Inspire. We are truly happy, we are blessed, and we are honored to have you as our guest on this evening's program. So, Sister Karen, share with us, how did you first come into contact with our beloved Mother Sai?
Sai Ram. So I will first offer my deepest gratitude at the lotus feet of my beloved Mother, Father Sai, for this opportunity to speak today, but also for this life he has given me and the ability to see and touch him within my heart and within everything around me in the world. Sai Ram. So my first knowledge of Swami in physical form, of the full embodiment of divinity on earth, came to me in the year 2000 through a mentor, healer, and now dear friend, Meredith Young Sowers from the Still Point Institute. And I will speak about that a little bit later. But I have to preface a little bit of my history and my relationship with God from a very, very, very early age, in age-appropriate ways. I was born and raised in Switzerland, in Geneva, Switzerland, to an American father with a Jewish background and a French mother with a Catholic background. My father is a staunch atheist, still is, at 90, soon to be 94. And my mother kept her beliefs very much underground during many, many, many years of marriage. But I came to find later that she had deep roots with the Ramakrishna mission, which I will also touch upon later. I grew up in a Calvinist society in Geneva, which is the seat of where Calvin taught, Calvin being a staunch Protestant, a very rigid part of the Protestant belief, and which means that they believe in the word of the Bible. There is no worship, no devotional worship to idols. And it follows very much the mentality, the general mentality of the Swiss, a country that I love, but know that they have their very, very, very rigid view of what God is. So with this kind of background, I have to say also that God was not a welcome subject in my household. I don't think anybody knew what to do with God, but I did nonetheless have a very, very strong bond with a God that had no name. I would speak to God. I would have incredible conversation with God as a child. I would go into nature. We would interact. He would teach me about nature, about life, about love in amazing ways for me. He was so real. He was my best companion. I was a social child. I was not an isolated child by any stretch, but my favorite times were with God. He taught me even about meditation. I found out much later. So this was early childhood. And then adolescence came in. Adolescence was a bit challenging. I think it always is. And in particular in this time during the 70s. And I still have a very firm relationship with God, but I was very much out there trying to place myself. But I had one single event that would seal, that would change my life. One single event that would change my life, in my view, in my relationship with God. I was in a situation like many young people with friends, and it was a time where people like to smoke marijuana, and I was a little bit afraid, but I accepted what came to me that evening. And within one inhale, the ground dropped from under my feet. Myself, I had no longer a sense of self. The self disappeared completely. There was only witnessing. I could feel sounds. I could see my heartbeat, the blood flowing in and out. I could hear the conversations. Everything was there, but I had no point of reference of I. It felt, so it was not blissful. It was just what it was, but there were moments there was an I that was trying to recapture itself, and it was terrified. And so, long story short, I'll pass. The next morning, I'm back going to school, doing my thing. The reality was completely changed from that day on for the rest of my life. It was very difficult at the time because I had nothing to base my experience on. I didn't know what no self was, but I felt that something in me had died, or something in this life had died. There was the point of reference was very loose. Who am I? What is this I? And so I went to school. Everything appeared like a dream. It seemed like it wasn't real, but I did my thing. Nobody noticed anything. I was going to school. I was talking to my friends, but something in me had let go, and I couldn't understand it. But it gave me, from then on, this real sense of impermanence and transience. The knowledge of death or of non-being was very, very strong, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I spend the rest of my life, or the next 20 years, trying to recapture that sense of self, that I was somebody. So with adolescence, it meant that, I had to affirm myself with friends. I then went into my studies eventually. I did things that rewarded a sense of self. But there was always this knowledge that there was no self. So before, as I was starting to do that, to try to get out of the fear and to feel that I existed, I met a friend at the time. I was 19 years old, who was very involved in Sufism. And his mother had been involved in Sufism, and his brothers, and they had driven to India and lived in India for a year, came back and explained to me what was at the heart of Sufism. And most of you know that Sufism is a branch of Islam, and it's the mystical aspect of Islam. And Sufism was the exact opposite of the Calvinist society of Switzerland. It was very much about living through yourself, your emotion. There was a lot of emotion and devotion and opening the heart that went on. I met the Sufi teacher that was located in Geneva, London, and Katwijk in the Netherlands. And I would travel there and do retreats. And I was fully involved with this because it touched my heart. It made sense. It touched the ways I always related to God in here. And it made me understand that whatever I had been going through was part of my search, that it was God opening my heart. And during that same time, around the same years, my mother, who had seen in me an interest in all things meditation in her life, she opened up and had started to talk to me about her experiences with Eastern philosophies and religions. She had traveled across India from ashram to ashram. She had met Ananda Mayima. Some of you know this woman saint. She had spent time at the Ramakrishna mission, and she started telling me about the universality of life and that God is within us. So all this matched together. All these pieces were coming together. And it's my life started changing. I started to understand that there was another way of living parallel to this little I. And fast forward to continue my regular life, I went to school. I went to graduate school. I studied psychology, not surprising, to understand the psyche, to understand my psyche. I went into analysis myself, and that was an extraordinary journey into the unconscious and all these wonderful pieces. And I got married. I raised 2 children, and around 2000, I became interested. I called consciously in prayer for the coming of a new teacher. I needed a teacher. My Sufi teacher had passed away just before I got married. And my children were I think they were 5 and 7. And I started praying earnestly. I was reading eclectic material, spiritual material, and I prayed out loud. I said, dear God, I want you to please bring me a teacher in flesh and blood that I can follow. And within a week, I found this wonderful healer, this medical intuitive, this incredible human being who is a devotee of Swami. I started taking her classes. I went to the school in New Hampshire, and she had a picture of Jesus in the back. She had a picture of Sai Baba on the other side. And she always brought up his teachings. For me, it was an opening. It was complete faith. It just came like this. I started having dreams. I remember praying to Baba and asking him to accept me as a devotee. I had no idea about anything within the structure of Sai Baba except her experience, and she had had some interviews with Swami as well, she and her husband. So year 2000, my life radically changed in that way, but it was a series of transformations. So this is how I got to Swami. There was a pull and a magnet within me at always, and it came. Swami and God came to me through challenges, and the biggest challenge being the knowledge of transience. When you experience it within yourself, or experience the life experiences, the non-self, even for a moment, it opens doors, it opens a certain amount of fear, but that fear was my best friend. My best friend. God came also as that fear. He was the loving parent when I was a little child. He was the dramatic experience in my adolescence, and he was the search, and he was the finding, and everything after that.
Sister Cara, that's a most extraordinary upbringing and contact with many different persons on your spiritual path. Very, very interesting is your journey to Sufism at the tender age of 19. And then your parents, one being Jewish, one being a French Catholic. So you've had a sort of Sarvadharma upbringing with your parents and your interaction, which is so very wonderful at a very tender age. As you highlighted, you're always involved or drawn to understand, who am I? Why have I been placed on the face of the earth? What is my purpose? And then you came into contact with Sri Satya Sai Baba through this particular teacher. I know that you've been to Prashanti Nilayam. Share with us the very first time that you laid eyes on our beloved Mother Sai. What was that experience and feeling like?
I remember that first darshan. I remember the magic of it. I burst into tears. I was a mess. I was a mess. I went with my mother. So you again have to go back a little bit. My mother did the class with this healer, and she came up to me. I became a teacher for this healer when my mother became a student. She came up to me and she said, "Karen, who is this on the wall?" And I said, "Mom, this is Satya Sai Baba. Meredith will speak to him and about him." And she said, "Ah, Sai Baba." She walked away. And then she came back at the end of the class and she said, "I'm going to see him before the year ends." She flew. She was 60. I don't remember. I think she was in her 65. She flew to see him without me. And she went with a group. She had an interview. Beautiful, beautiful, extraordinary story. And while she was there, I went to the center in Connecticut for the first time. So she was in Party and I was at the center. I was praying for Mom. Mom was in a little group. Nobody had an interview. And when the group left, she was still there and Swami called her in. So she had this beautiful one-on-one experience with Swami. And at the same time, I went to the center. I remember sitting at the center the first time I went. I fell apart. I sobbed and I said, "Where have you been all my life? Where have you been all my life?" So Mom comes back. Mom sends me a beautiful gift, a CD, and I express that elsewhere, a CD with his picture and his beautiful voice that I listened to in the car. Some miracles appeared on his photograph, and I knew somehow that a blessing had happened. And then my mother said, "Let's go back." And she says, "Karen, you come with me." And but it took a few months, and a big event happened that I will share after, in between, to ready me to go. So fast forward, I'm in Party with my mother, and I'm seeing Swami coming here from Darshan, and I was almost in the front line, I think, close anyway, and I was looking at him, but I was shocked because he didn't look at me. You know, it's that thing. He's like, wait a minute. I've prayed. You've responded to me in incredible ways, but he didn't look at me. And there was this feeling that maybe I'm not worthy. This whole stuff came up, which was perfect. I had to deal with all the stuff. But, you know, we stayed there for about 3 weeks, and I've had amazing eye-to-eye contact with him. But this eye-to-eye contact, it wasn't this sweet, loving eye-to-eye contact. It was that look, that long look. And I felt like my whole body was emptying out. He was my liver was in my head, my kidneys in my toes. It's like my whole body was I had no thought, just sit there. And he'd look at me. And when his chair turned, that's when the look, he said, so these experiences were very, very strong, and they triggered very strong dreams. And so his guidance has been there all along. That was the first darshan. I've had other darshans that have had, their consequences as well.
What a very powerful, spiritually moving experience you've had when you first looked into his eyes. That it's like mesmerizing, where everything turned inside out, and you said you were just lost, no thought. Amazing.
It was,
So,
it was a full encounter. Yes.
so Sister Karen, that was around the year 2000, yes?
I went to see him. I learned of him in 2000, but I didn't go and see him until 2004 because, I was a student with Meredith and I was a teacher with Meredith. Then Mom went to see Swami. And so in 2004, in September for Ganesh Chaturthi, I was there. Yeah.
So share with us. I know you've had wonderful, beautiful experiences with Swami over the years of your contact. Can you share with us two of your most memorable ones?
I would be glad to. And so I will choose one at the very beginning of my journey. I mean, my journey to him, and one toward before he left his body. So I think it will give a good. So during that year, 2004, before I went to see Swami. So first you have to understand that I have not had no interaction, personal interviews with Swami. Everything that happened was loud and clear in the heart. Loud and clear. These were my interviews. They were the inner views, as we call them. And so in 2004, I was diagnosed with a skin cancer of the most, on my leg, a very, very, very tiny one, but it was the most dangerous of skin cancers. And I was terrified. During that time, my husband and I had no health insurance. We were in the middle of transitions for different businesses and everything. So there was no insurance. And I had to go through a surgery because they had diagnosed what it was, but nobody knew how far it had gone. And so I had two small children, and I was very, very, very scared. Very scared. I mean, that panic again of losing life and my children, all of this panic, this noise came storming up. And so it took us a month to get the insurance for it to kick in so that we could afford paying for a very expensive surgery. They had to go to lymph nodes. They had to go see, how far this had gone. So we waited a month. So that month of not knowing was another one of Swami's incredible gifts. But believe me, it did not feel like a gift at first. But it took the first 4 days. I would throw myself at my altar on my knees and I would sob and I would cry. And I say, Swami, why are you doing this? I don't want to die. I don't want to die. This whole drama. And I would sit there at my altar because I knew it was what I had to do. And I sat there, took my breaths. I did all my hand over heart, my breathing, my techniques that always worked. And I would ask Swami, what should I do? Speak to me. And, my fears were there. And I heard a little voice, and I can say it came from my right. I heard a little voice, but it was in my heart, but it came from the right. And it said very, very sweetly, very quietly in the noise of my angst, it said, who are you? And I remember sitting there, no, Swami, this is no time to be spiritual, Swami. I cannot, if I'm going to die, I need to know how, and again, the voice said sweetly, but who are you? Nothing. I wanted to hear nothing. I was crying. I said, I cannot be spiritual now. Now is not the time. I need you to come in a big way. And then I heard again, yes, but who are you? And at that very last time, the third time he said it, I heard and I dropped into a place. I dropped where all the fears dropped. And that sweet, sweet little voice, I realized, was here, was my very own, that I had all and everything in here, and that he was closer to me than anything else, even closer than my fear. And that completely let low my fears. They were reduced from this intensity to almost nothing. And that voice was so beautiful and loving. I knew at that moment everything was okay. So what I did is I thank you, Swami. I didn't know how and what, but that voice was so incredible. From that moment, for the next month, I took Swami's picture with me, and I could hear and feel what that voice meant inside. What was that voice? It was me. That was something much bigger available to me than my fear and the fear of death. And I worked my way all the way to the time I went to the hospital. And by the time I went to the hospital, I had let go all outcomes. I knew everything would be okay, whether I lived or I died. It's not okay that, oh, your diagnosis is going to be fine. No, it was, even if it was not, I would be okay. So I had my surgery, and indeed everything was okay. It was all very limited to what it had been. And that's been now 18 years. So within a month, I remember getting out of the operation. And when the doctor said, "You're fine, you're all good," I said, "Saidam," and he and the nurses turned around to wonder what I was doing. And I went home and I said to Mom, "Let's get our ticket. We're going to see Swami." So this is an example of how I've experienced Swami within me, not only in emotional peace, but in moments where I need guidance, where I need to touch the truth, mine or in somebody else's. I could always do it because I know he is right here and I can hear him. That was a turning point. So that's an experience with Swami that I wanted to share, because it was a radical one. Nothing comes lightly with me. It comes in radical ways. And then the second one I would like to share was in 2010, summer 2010, about 6 months before Swami left his body. And we went as a group, USA group, and he showered us with his blessings. He gave us darshans that lasted forever. It was an incredible trip. And in the morning at the beginning, everybody in my group had written a letter to Swami to pass on to Swami. So, and as I said, I had not received the memo. I had no idea people were giving their letters. It didn't even occur to me. But that morning, everybody gave their letters and the boys were picking up the letters. There were tons and tons of letters. And Swami took them, and I thought to myself, I missed my opportunity. He went, we had the darshan. So in the afternoon, during the break between the two darshans, I decided to write a letter to Swami. And it was a very heartfelt, personal letter, but it was a prayer to Swami. It is a prayer of surrender to Swami that I give him every day. And in it, I did say, "Swami, I want no longer any obstacles between you and me. I pray that you take out anything in my life that could possibly be a hindrance in my reaching you completely. I want to be with you. I want to be in you, you and me, only you. And whatever it takes," I said, "whatever it takes, Swami, even if it's hard." I said that in my letter. So I did the letter. I folded the letter in like four, it was a small envelope. I had a way I folded it, very particular way I folded it. I put the letter, and I said, when I was in the group, I said to the lady in front row, I said, "Take the letter. And if he passes by, try to give him the letter." Swami comes in for darshan. Sure enough, he takes my letter. It was the only letter that was given to him, because they were all given in the morning. He took my letter in his hand, and he went around. He took one other letter from a student and went to sit on the dais. And he had 2 letters on his lap, just 2 letters. And so I thought, oh my goodness, Swami has my letter. The boy next to him, the student, unfolds the letters, puts my letter on his lap, And Swami goes there and he reads the letter. And I knew it was my letter because I saw the way it was folded. I knew that nobody folded the letter the way I did. So he unfolded, the letter was unfolded, and he's just sitting there and he's reading the letter. And I'm looking at him, I'm saying, he's reading, and he was reading the letter. Then the boy turns the letter over because it was 1.5 pages, not so long, handwritten. He reads the other side. Then the boy turns the letter again. He reads it again, flips it, reads the other side. And it happens a third time, 3 times. And at this point, I am sweating bullets. And my heart is beating out of my chest because I know he has my letter. And so he has the letter, he read the letter. And then he looks up at the lady's side. He looks for a while and he lifts both hands like this. And at that point, again, I fall apart because I know he has blessed my request. Beautiful darshans. The rest of the trip was miraculous, was incredible. And I come home to find out just that during this time I was in Parti, my husband had chosen another life. He had decided he was going to leave the family, and start a new life. And I can tell you that this was, yes, a shock, but I knew instantly, so there was the emotions here, but there was a hand over the heart. I knew Swami was there. You asked me, this is what you need to be closer to me. This is what I've done. And so it was a hard time because, my husband left. We divorced the same year, within a few months after, and Swami left his body. So it was a double whammy of loss that year. And in the end, it was, with regard to the marriage, it was starting all over again. I had to take my life completely in charge. And I have Swami so close to me. I have only Swami to guide me. I have no distractions. And it's not that I have no distractions. I have distractions. I have my moments. I have all of this, but I have access to Swami. And I know he did this for my own good. So these are the 2 main pieces. They seem like they were big traumas, but I was allowed to go underneath the trauma, find the love and the goodness within those, and how they've grown me. And I think that is the heart of all spiritual growth.
That is really, really amazing, Sister Karen. And the way you described how Swami looked and read the letter, and then so quickly after your request, he responded. And I remember, as you described, it was painful, it was challenging, at the surface of the mind, but below, you knew that this is what Swami was orchestrating for your own divine good. And I remember him saying once, do you think I would confront you with pain were there not a reason for it? Open your heart to pain as you do now for pleasure, for it is my will wrought by me for your own good. It seems to be an example of what has happened there in that particular experience. So thank you so much for sharing. So, Sister Karen, at this point in time, what does Sai Baba mean to you?
Sai Baba to me is not separate from me. He is my friend. He is my parent. He is my very life breath. He is an experience. Sai Baba is an experience, inseparable from me, but also inseparable from nature. Sai Baba has granted me the greatest miracle is discrimination, is the ability to listen within, to the ability to see him through and below the mental noise, which we need. We need the mental noise to work. We need to do all these things it's perfect. But he has granted me a form of perception, and I learned it, as I started this school of healing. But Swami was forming me. He was training me. And so now I can say that Sai Baba means to me a different kind of language of life. And he has given me the ability to feel the difference between what is true and what is not true, what is real, what is unreal, and what is permanent and what is transient. So Sai Baba is that knowledge, the giver of knowledge. And he's also everything in between the mind and the heart, because what I'm talking about is the heart. To listen to the heart is much bigger. It's an expanded view of life, and the mind is more of a servant to that. And sometimes the mind can be a bully, but Swami has shown me that he is all of that, and that I can call upon him that way, that we can all call upon him that way. He has taught me to not help. He has taught me to walk with others at times to find that inner goodness. So that is Sai Baba to me.
Very, very beautiful and very unique. Sister Karen, what do you now feel and understand as your true purpose on the face of the earth?
Good question. My true purpose, my reason for living, is to serve the present moment. And so that means my happiness and my joy today are defined not by my story and my resume, but by my ability to listen and to serve and to love another in the forms that are needed. So if that answers the question, that would be my true purpose is to serve what is given to me right now. When Swami presents me, I don't question it, and I just do it. And my attitude of doing it for him changes everything. It makes me happy to do it, even if the task at hand is hard.
Very, very interesting answer. Sister Karen, Baba has a saying, and this was given at one of his birthday celebrations. He addresses us as embodiments of the divine Atma, embodiments of love, embodiments of bliss. And he taught us that we should affirm this particular affirmation: I am God. I am not different from God. I am Satchit Ananda, truth, consciousness, and bliss. Fear, grief, and anxiety can never affect me. I am Om Tat Sat Om. I'm sure you're familiar with that affirmation and statement. What does that statement mean to you now, and how are you able to navigate and process it into your daily life?
So navigating is the right word, because we navigate that. And I know that truth and God and Swami has to be accessed beyond the mind. The mind is too limited. We can't know truth with the mind. The mind can only help us navigate, perhaps, but the experience, even never mind the Satchitananda, but the experience of knowing is an experience. And so God is an experience. Swami is an experience. Swami says that karma becomes transformed into sadhana when it is done as seva. So I have I am using this to the fullest of my ability as the dictates of what I should be doing. Brother, are we still on? I do not see you.
Yes, sister, we are still on.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. So basically, Seva has become my way of living, because Seva is really just a question of attitude, of choosing the place where I'm going to live. I'm going to live. Am I going to live with the heart? Am I going to live in the knowledge of serving, and I have a body, and that is the only thing I can really do right now? Or am I going to try to serve a mind that's going to fall into, these 5 enemies that Swami speaks about, which are greed, lust, anger. The other ones are not coming to my mind, but they're there. And so just to navigate through them, to weave, I weave Swami that way. And Swami is nothing else in myself as the intention, the attachment that and the focus I put in everything I do. So Seva has been the big part of my of how I'm going to navigate that. And we can talk about Seva if you will. Today, I am taking care of my parents. And I don't know if you want me to elaborate upon this at this point.
Yes, Sister Karen, thank you very much for that very sincere sharing. And yes, it leads us to this very important, beautiful seva that you are doing for your parents. When we look around in the society today, there are many people, instead of personally looking after their parents, they have chosen to put parents in nursing homes or old age homes and pay for professional care. But here you have 2 parents in their 90s, and you have chosen to serve them lovingly and selflessly. That is a tremendous time-consuming seva that you have been doing for so many years. Share with us, because Swami places a lot of emphasis on devotion to parents. He says when you serve your parents, it's like serving God. When a parent blesses a child, it's like God blessing that child. And he's further said, those who serve their parents, they need not do any other sadhana. That is enough. And by disregarding your parents, he says, you will never be able to prosper in life. And those of us who call ourselves devotees of God must have as the first credential the worship and reverence of the parents, especially the mother. So our question is, Sister Karen, why did you choose to serve them, bearing in mind the time, the challenge, as opposed to placing them in an institution or a home? And what has that experience been for you in serving your parents?
Well, thank you for that question. It is a time and a task that I don't question. It's in front of me. The need is here. So I do it. So that's along with that. I mean, Swami has been very clear to me. It's not even, that's why, I don't even take it as hardship, because it is self-evident to me. Now, that said, I say that with my mother, my mother lives with me. I brought my mother in a few years ago. My mother has, it's easy to have mom home. It's easy because she has been my best friend all my life. She has been a mentor. She has introduced me to God in ways that are so grand. And she's a woman of courage. My mother has, and I need to speak about her, I mean, to kind of explain this easy part of the seva is that she was 16 years old during the World War II in Paris, and her father was one of the heads of the French resistance, the undergrounds in Paris. And so there was a lot going on. She has done things of such, it's between 13 and 16 was pretty much her, or 12 and 16 were the years of the war. And she has done things that of great courage at that time. And she was actually arrested because they were looking for her father, who had been, so she was arrested by the Gestapo, the Nazi police in Paris, her mother as well. And she was in jail, and they were executing everybody in the jail alphabetically, all the women. It was a women's prison. My mother's last name starts with a W. So she was one of the last ones. The priest gave her last rites. And whenever they were shooting down in the courtyard, she would be singing the French national anthem, La Marseillaise. And so she was passing messages. She did a lot, and she saved her father, basically, who had disappeared. He couldn't do anything. He had disappeared. He went into hiding with my mother's brother. So my mother's courage was incredible. But what happened just when the prison was almost empty, the Allies had come and they had taken over Paris, and she was freed. And she was freed. She was this 16-year-old walking through the courtyard of the prison, and the trucks were there with people they were still deporting to the camps, Auschwitz, and they were yelling at her addresses and phone numbers to reach to their families to say, we are gone. Mom to this day remembers each one of those. Her question was, why am I saved? She was the only one. They opened the doors for her in the prison. She walked out. And when she walked out, she started a serious search for God. And that is after that time that she got involved with Ramakrishna Mission there in Paris. And these things started happening after the war. And so her incredible courage and her wisdom have carried me. So that story to say that my mother has been an inspiration. I also want to say that my mother was president of the Sai Center in Geneva, Switzerland, before she came to here, so that I could take care of her. So easy to take care of mom, very easy to take care of mom. Things are changing in her health. Things will be changing. And this is just the way it is. And I wouldn't think otherwise than to take care of her. I could not even fathom it. So, you talk about sacrifice. For me, I don't really see it. What else, what better thing could I do but to serve these times when she needs me? It brings tears to my eyes. My father, so my parents are divorced. They've been divorced since I'm 25 years old. It was a hard divorce, and they became somewhat friends at some point. And here he lives 5 doors down. My father is very autonomous still. He's going to be 94. Mom is going to be 93 in a few weeks. And so they visit each other. Of course, he comes here. I feed him. I make sure he's well. But my relationship to my dad, and I want to speak to that because for all people who may not have a smooth relationship with one or two parents, which happens, it happens to most of us. The challenge here is also where the blessing will be found. It's always easy to pray to God comfortably on your cushion when everything is well. It's comfortable to serve a person you love. When you have grit, I have grit with my father. I've always had grit with my father. I love him dearly because I've accessed that place underneath that, he has done the best he can in all the circumstances that he could. He did the best he can, or he would have done something else, right? So he did. Even though it was not to my benefit at all times, not to mom's benefit at all times, he has provided a lot. And what he couldn't provide me, I've learned to provide for myself and to provide to others. The gift of listening, of acknowledging, of loving, That he has taught me. So I am grateful for that. I serve that in him. So while we can talk and he can drive me crazy at times, I will never, I cannot even think of any other way than me taking care of him. When the needs become maybe more physical, I don't know. I leave it to Swami. I don't think about the future because I don't know what Swami is going to do at that age. I don't know. But it is my first and foremost duty and joy to serve as such. Yeah, so this is how it is.
Thank you so much, Sister Karen. That is so inspiring. It is so touching. It is so soulful what you've shared. And you get so much of joy. And as you said, it naturally flows from you. So there is no challenge, there is no hardship involved. And that is so wonderful. It's truly, truly a blessing for you to share that. And I know it will inspire others to do the same. And Sister Karen, your qualification, you did psychology, you've done so much of seva to your parents and others, and you're now involved in visiting nursing homes, developing close friendships with residents, eventually walking with them to their final moments. That is also a wonderful seva. Share a little bit of that experience. What does it feel like? What is involved when you sit with somebody and some of them may be in their final moments? What it is you actually do and what is that feeling and seva like?
So I started doing this seva in response to Sai Baba's calling for reaching out to those who might suffer, to those in need, to those to love and to grow through seva. And I also started that my motivation to work with end of life was exactly in alignment with my own trepidations over death and dying and transience. So it was just a natural evolution for me to work. So what I do, what I've learned to do is when I go to a nursing home, first of all, I've developed relationships with the elderly I would go to somebody and have a relationship with them for 2 years, 3 years, for as long as they would really, they had for themselves. So it was not like, hospice, you just go, they call you because the person needs support when they're dying. For me, it was getting to know them, finding ways to have them discover perhaps and discover in myself this unity we all have, even though we knew nothing of each other. We were not bound by attachment. We were two strangers. So I would walk into the room, in the nursing room, in the room of the elderly patient. And as I walked in the room, I knew that I had dedicated everything to Swami, to the present moment. And to listen, that the way I do it is by being fully a listener with my whole body, my whole being, not only my ears. My story just was left behind the door. I go into their rooms, into their quarters. I would sit with them and we would just start talking. And my goal all the time was to find the goodness in them, because people have life stories. We all share pain of loss of health, loss of family. We all share this continuous change. We might be at different parts in our lives, but we are united by these big lines in life. And many of us live in our stories and have difficulties either forgiving ourselves, forgiving others. And so we weave that, and then we talk about our joyful moments. I always tried to focus on what was highest and best in them. And the only way I could do it is by being connected to that. So the bond that happened was very, very strong, not in an attachment, emotional attachment, as much as a feeling of well-being that we shared together, one-on-one. That service was one-on-one. I can give you an example. This example, I used to visit a man, very old man, of course, in his 90s. He was Russian originally. He had been in Russia during World War II as a 16-year-old, like my mother, and they were trying to recruit him to be in the front and to fight. And his family said to an uncle, take him out of the country, hide him and escape. And he went through Eastern Europe, through the woods during the worst time in Russia, and then Western countries. They ran through all the way to the shores. They took a boat and they went to America. He escaped the Russian army, being on the front, and he arrived in America. And when he came to America, he was snatched by the American government and he was sent to fight in the Pacific. So this man went from one to the other. I think that, when you're academized to fight, whether you're here or there, you fight. He went there, and so he was confronted with having to kill people. And he had PTSD. He was a gentle soul, but he was a man who carried the death of people, and it was always present. There was a ghost on his face. But he made it through. He came back. He married. He was very close to his wife. He had a son who sometimes came in, and it was so difficult. The heaviness was so difficult. My peace was always, when he was mourning, it was always to go and try to discover what was good in him, for him to touch what was good in him. And I so discovered, I would ask him, what is it that you love to do? And he said, only one thing. I love to garden. I love to make flowers all over my little garden outside my house. Every year I go plow. He says, I am happy when my knees are in the soil and I grow flowers. And I said, you create beauty. I said, you create beauty and it makes you feel good. Then the goodness is in you, that you can create beauty for the world, for yourself. And this, because he kept saying how there was nothing good in him. I said, find how you love and you will find the goodness in you. And we did that by conversation, but that was always my focus, was to go where people shine, and where they shine, how I walk myself back is, where do I shine? It's not a job description. It's not your qualification. It's how you love. And this is what I did with the elderly. The Seva was my transformation, but it was also somehow there was a legacy there, because many of them were able to touch that and depart with that. So when it came to the final moment, sometimes I came in the final days. On some occasions I was there. A family called me when they were actually, going unconscious, and they wanted me to hold their hands. So what I would do is say, the family would leave. It was very difficult for family. Some things also family couldn't talk about. So they asked me to be there, because they knew their parent had experience of love somehow, of goodness, not love. They loved their family, of course, but this special kind of. So they called me in. I would hold their hands and I would recite the Gayatri. Sometimes I would murmur it. Sometimes it was quiet, but I would murmur it at one point, because I wanted them, even if they were unconscious, to hear. I wanted them to be able to exit with the Gayatri mantra. And that moment of being with them, I felt so connected. It's like having darshan of Swami, because there's only God. When somebody leaves their body, there's only God. The story has no importance, whether it's mine, whether it's theirs, anybody, nothing. The world has no importance. There is just movement. And I discovered, brother, that death is not the end of life. It's only the change of form. And it's not in my head that I know that. It's here. It's not a passive thing to die. It's not just life fizzling out. It's a movement. It's a presence, and that presence is God. This is where Swami was. I would say the Gayatri Swami was there so lovingly blessing the exit of the person. And I was there to experience it at some level as well. Very big blessing. Sacred experience.
Sister Karen, that is extraordinary what you've just described and shared. It's really mind-boggling, and what a beautiful seva. And as you said, it brought about transformation with yourself. It helped you to understand really what is death, what is life, how we are connected. It's really, really beautiful sharing. But I want to go back to Dad.
Yes.
Dad is an atheist. You and Mom are staunch believers in God. You can even say that you met God in physical form, not based on fate or what other people have said, like in the times of Rama, Krishna, Jesus. Sister Karen went to Prashanti Nilayam and experienced. You saw God in human form. You experienced that divinity. That is your own experience. Nobody can take that away from you. So that is your direct experience. So how, over the years, with you and Mom believing in God and Father being an atheist, has there been any reconciliations? Have there been discussions between yourself and him as to that God really exists and you can actually prove it? How is that, or how has that relationship and discussion been over the years?
So, there hasn't been much evolution in as far as that's concerned. So there's certain things, and for a long time, to my great frustration, that it was very hard to reach. And my father is a man of thoughts only and science only. Now, he's not a scientist. He was an airline pilot for 30 years. And, but he has very little access also to his, to understanding the emotions in the mind. So our communication is hard. He's a man of the senses. He likes food. He liked women. He likes things, beautiful things, which is all fine. It represents a whole aspect of humanity, and an aspect in all of us as well. I mean, we're part of that humanity, but he has not been able to expand that. And whenever it was brought up, because I tried because I don't talk about it anymore, but in the magic of Swami, or of an experience, or when we had miracles in our center, he looked at me and said, it's crazy. It's crazy. It's not, and I felt very dismissed at first, that it was another way for him to make my life story irrelevant. And that was an issue I carried over time a lot. And I know my mother has as well. But now, whether he's there or not does not have as much importance. The grit I have is because sometimes a conversation is so still where it was when I was 8 years old, 10 years old, 15 years old. It's very much the same. So he has not moved that way, but he thinks Mom and I are a little bit crazy. I have no way to prove to him that God is here, because my proof will never be proof to him. He can't work it out. He can't explain it. So therefore it doesn't exist. So I cannot base my seva to him and my love for him on that. I cannot. I get frustrated, and sometimes I'm very sad. Sometimes I'm very sad that we've never been able to break the wall. But we have, as far as I'm concerned, is I have to go under there. I found, first of all, a way to be grateful to him. He has made me a better person through a certain amount of suffering. He has taken me all over the world to travel. I mean, that has been very important education. He gave me a great education as well. All these things. I am indebted to Dad, and I serve that, but I mainly serve Swami, and I say, Swami, when he drives me crazy, you have to help me. And I ask him, you have to make me completely forgive him by the time he leaves. but I don't know. I guess the only way it can happen is when I go from here to here. And that is the big thing I've learned to do. And I can do with Dad. When I don't speak to Dad, I love him to pieces. When he's in the house, and Mom is like that too. So we have a funny little circus going on. But that's irrelevant as to whether I'm going to serve him. Had he been, I respect people who cannot care for their parents physically, if they've been abused by their parents, if they witness it, there's some things. So we have to learn to care for our parents with an intermediary, meaning you can't physically be there for your parents. So make sure they're safe by bringing people who are going to take good care of them, be there to be present for them, show them you care for them in a different way. If you can't love them, like for instance, the way I love my mother, it's not possible for everybody, but you find ways to love with what you have. I think forgiveness comes in our ability to give. It's not whether they've corrected themselves. Whether Dad or not is able to correct his ways is irrelevant. It's how I am going to be able to perceive him beyond that. And that is my relationship with God. That's it.
That is so beautiful. Really, really, really touching and inspiring how you explained it genuinely and sincerely. Swami also said once that really and truly there is no atheist, because if the atheist believes in himself, he's really believing in God.
Yes.
So that's a very interesting perspective.
Very interesting perspective. Yes. Because he says, I asked him several times, Dad, what do you believe in? And he says, I believe in love, which, always makes me smile. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, you believe in love, in his way of love and his perception of love. And that's fine. But that means there's of course, obviously something he is bonded to that is also bigger than himself, that is beyond his mind, because he's referring, I suppose, to emotional love, which is good in and of itself. Again, I think we all have a story and we all have a purpose for one another, right? And he's afraid of death. He's very afraid of death, so he doesn't think about it. There's always sound in his house. There's music. He loves music. And again, that's beauty. He needs to surround himself with beauty. So yeah, there's music. He falls asleep with music, or he has a television on. He can never be alone, because I think being alone would open to something bigger. So whatever he needs to do, whatever he's going to accomplish in this life, is God's will.
Thank you very much, Sister Karen. And I really love what you said, that you serve him and your parents unconditionally. Not because of their belief and how they behave, it's going to condition the way you serve them. They are your parents, you serve them regardless of who they are, what they do. That is really, really beautiful. So, Sister Karen, I've asked this question to a number of guests in the past. Some people have said that the question that I'm going to ask you, some people have said, what a difficult question. It's a loaded question. Many people have reacted differently. But the question deals with Swami has come to create a better society. He has come to create a better world. The instrument or vehicle that he is using is the practice of human values. He speaks about the role of each one of us in contributing to world peace by being better and more transformed individuals. But against your background, your experience, your savor, what can you share or recommend for people out there based on your own experience of what each one of us can do really to have a more loving society, a more value-based society, and essentially to make the world a better place?
So I will repeat what other people have told you. It's a loaded question. I think, the first word that comes to me is tolerance and flexibility. I think that my past has afforded me experiencing, different cultures, different belief systems, and has forced me to be adaptable. I don't belong anywhere, and at the same time I belong everywhere. There's a piece of me a little bit everywhere, and I think that is something we have to cultivate. And for people who have not had that background, I would say it's one heart at a time. We don't have to make big changes. We don't have to create big things. We don't have to do big acts of love. We can do small acts of love and they become enormous. So it's finding ways to love, sometimes in the places where it seems impossible. And for that, we have to know ourselves a little bit. So I'm backtracking. And what that means is we have to learn to listen. The greatest miracle, as I said earlier, I think the greatest miracle for me has been to learn to be able to listen and to differentiate the language of the heart and the mind. It's their textures, they're different. You listen with your being, you feel. You've got to learn to feel. You have to ask yourself who you are. I think people have got to be introspective if the world is going to change. And it's a bit of a scary thought, because we're thinking, well, how many people really ask themselves that question? Who am I? What am I? Because it's not even a who, it's a what am I? And to start understanding, to go from really the mind, the logic, the attachment to an opinion, and understanding a little more who we are and allow other people to be different. In terms of, I think we have to just do our own work. I think I would invite everybody to start questioning. You can start reading literature. It's funny because I read much less literature. I read now mostly poetry, either ecstatic poetry or awakened poetry, because the words become organic instead of mental. And so people can read about spirituality. I would encourage people to learn about themselves, to find ways in which they love. That's the first thing. Also, find the goodness within yourself. Find the goodness within yourself. It's people would say, well, I'm good. A lot of people don't think they're good. A lot of people carry loads of baggage and they give excuses in their mind. Yeah, well, I do this, I do that. Is where do you feel good about yourself? I think the world starts to change when you start to realize that there's goodness in everybody, in yourself, first and foremost. When you touch it in yourself, I can see it in you, Faiz. I can pick that exact same spot where you are most loving, most shining. It's so evident to me. I feel it. I don't have you to explain me this or explain me that. And that is true for everybody. So if we can find the ways in which we love, if we can get to the feeling and the experience of that, I think we will start creating peace. I was told that it's a critical mass thing in terms of the world. I don't fully understand that, but that we don't have to be a majority of people who've transformed so that the votes will outdo the other votes. It's not that. It's apparently if a handful or one person finds enlightenment, you change the whole orbit of the world. Everything changes. They say when fire was invented with the cavemen on one part of the world, it was invented on the other side of the world at the same time. Everywhere, fire was invented. They didn't talk. It was invented. It was something that was learned how to do from within, a consciousness shift. And I think that I do believe that the consciousness shift happens as you change your consciousness. So Swami, all of us who follow Swami, we're all yearning for that. That alone will change the world. I'm hoping Swami said, the world will transform. The golden age is upon us.
Sister Karen, the Sri Satya Sai Global Council, Trinidad and Tobago, expresses gratitude and appreciation to you for taking the time to share your personal journey, your perspective based on the teachings of our beloved Mother Sai. May Bhagwan Sri Satya Sai Baba continue to bless and guide you, and may you continue to be the loving instrument you are in the unfolding of his divine mission. Jai Sai Ram.
Jai Sai Ram.